Deputy Lochlainn. You have 2 minutes, Deputy.
Minister, as you know, the Comptroller and Auditor General reported on his findings in relation to the fixed charge notice system, and the outcome is absolutely shocking. What he has revealed is that because of clearly widespread maladministration and very poor procedures, 1 in 5 motorists facing fixed charge notices are getting off. 1 in 5. We're talking here about 42,000 a year. Half of the summonses that were issued by the courts in relation to these, half of them were not served. Now, this is an absolute crisis, Minister. It's not good enough to issue circulars. We need to see how the hell this happened. And Minister, you know that 2 Garda whistleblowers brought this wider issue into the public domain last year. You and the Garda Commissioner, I believe, sought to undermine their credibility, talk down the numbers that were involved, and now we see very clearly that they have been vindicated. So, Minister, what are you going to do about this? This is a massive crisis of confidence for the public. The 71% of people who pay their fine, who take it on the chin, accept that they did break the speed limits or whatever they had done to break traffic laws, they need to know that the system applies to everybody. And, Minister, will you now apologise to the 2 Garda whistleblowers for the attempts by yourself and the Garda Commissioner at that time to discredit them, to undermine the scope of what they were bringing into the public domain, and acknowledge that they were right, that there was a widespread problem with a system of penalty points in this state, and it's going to be sorted out?
Deputy Higgins, 2 minutes, Deputy.
Minister, the problem is that there is a huge contradiction between the report of the Comptroller and Auditor General and the report of the Garda into the penalty points issue. The Comptroller found 600 repeat offenders with 3 or 4 terminations. The Garda report found a few. The Comptroller found 3,000 statute-barred point cases. There was no mention in the Garda report. Thousands of fixed penalty notices went missing and were unaccounted for, according to the Comptroller. There is no mention in the Garda report. The Comptroller said that large volumes of notices were terminated by Gardaí from outside their areas. The Garda report said 3. The Comptroller said that thousands of notices, cancellation, contravened the rules and regulations, and the Garda report said 600. And finally, the Comptroller said €1.2 million lost. The Garda report said a few thousand. Can you explain? Isn't it a case that the whistleblowers are exonerated as truthful and honest in the light of this revelation? And one person has left, another member subject to sanctions. Will you see that justice now prevails here? Finally, another victim of the traffic penalty points debacle. Gemma O'Doherty, a leading investigative journalist with independent newspapers, was sacked because she uncovered a story that the Garda Commissioner was the beneficiary of cancellation of penalty points. And according to the Irish Post, the editor of the Independent who sacked her was also a beneficiary of cancellation. Isn't that outrageous, and doesn't it smack, Minister, of a grotesque abuse of power?
Thanks,
and will
Deputy.
you speak out on this also?
Thanks, Deputy. And the Minister to respond. 4 minutes, Minister.
May just respond to both deputies, but on the last issue that the deputy who last spoke raised, I'm not privy to the background circumstances to anyone terminating their employment with independent newspapers, and I'm certainly not going to comment in any way on that. Céireann, I'm glad of this opportunity to comment on the findings of the Comptroller and Auditor General's report on the Garda fixed charge processing system. I welcome these findings because they confirm what went wrong with the system and what needed to be fixed. Broadly speaking, the findings in fact echo the findings of the examination of the same allegations which was carried out by Assistant Garda Commissioner John O'Mahony. I published Assistant Commissioner O'Mahony's report and also a related report by the Garda Professional Standards Unit earlier this year and referred them to the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Justice, Defence and Equality. Perhaps the key point is that the O'Mahony report broadly identified the same key issues of concern relating to the operation of the fixed charge processing system identified with the CNAG, namely a failure to follow cancellation procedures in a significant number of cases, a lack of adequate record keeping, and an inconsistency, and in many cases a laxity, in accepting justifications for speeding and other road traffic offences. Indeed, I previously have referenced some of the explanations accepted as exotic. There is absolutely no doubt that the findings of the CNAG reinforce both the concerns identified by the O'Mahony report about weaknesses in the fixed charge notice system and the case for corrective action, and action has been taken. Disciplinary proceedings were taken against a number of members of An Garda Síochána. A number of others were advised of the absolute necessity to follow correct procedures. A new Garda directive, cancellation of fixed charge notices, was issued to the entire force on the 30th of August 2013, aimed at significantly tightening up on procedures for cancellation. The Garda Commissioner has accepted and will implement specific and helpful recommendations by the CNAG on improving the fixed charge notice system and how it interacts with the court service and the driver licensing system. In addition, as I previously indicated, I have referred the two Garda reports to the Independent Garda Inspectorate for its advice on any further measures which may be required. I expect to receive a report from the Inspectorate in the near future. I welcome the action taken by the Commissioner and his commitment to implement the further recommendations we are addressing this evening. The result will be a fixed charge notice system which is more open and transparent and more robustly operated. This is essential if public confidence in the system and the enforcement of road traffic laws to be maintained. The Garda Síochána, along with the Road Safety Authority and other stakeholders, have done so much in recent years to improve road safety and reduce fatalities. Everything must be done to maintain that progress. The Garda Commissioner has my full support in the strong action he is taking. It is only fair to acknowledge that these reports and their findings and recommendations are in response to allegations of improper cancellation of fixed charge notices. But any fair assessment must also conclude on the evidence available that a great many of the most serious allegations have been found to be utterly without basis, including allegations of avoidable road fatalities linked to speeding drivers being improperly let off fixed charge notices, and allegations of hundreds of pulse records being destroyed. Perhaps most significantly, the member of the Garda Síochána making the allegations rejects all of the findings of the O'Mahony report and continues to claim that there has been widespread corruption and criminality on the part of senior members of the Garda Síochána. These are exceptionally serious allegations which the O'Mahony report found no basis in fact. My department has written to the member concerned, urging him to come forward with any evidence he may have to justify these allegations. And indeed, it is open to the member concerned to make an appropriate presentation, if he chooses to do so, to the Joint Oireachtas Justice Committee, but in fact that has not yet occurred. In conclusion, I welcome the finding of the Controller and Auditor General. The findings are in line with the findings of the report by Assistant Commissioner O'Mahony published earlier this year. I fully support the Garda Commissioner and the decisive action he is taking on foot of them, and I will do my best to ensure that any further coordination required between An Garda Síochána and the court services to ensure the efficient enforcement of summonses in the area of traffic offences does take place, and that issues that should be properly addressed when they come before the courts, that the courts have available to them all of the documentation and information they require. It's of course not available to me. Indeed, it would be highly inappropriate for me to in any way interfere with the independent approach taken by the courts or by, in particular, district judges in any individual cases that come before them with regard to any charges brought.
Thank you, Minister.
I
can come back to you in a moment.
Offences.
Deputy Minister, we have just 1 minute, I'm afraid.
I'm sure you'll accept that the 71% of citizens who accepted the fine and took the penalty points on the chin will be appalled to know that, you know, up to 1 in 5 managed to get away with this, and that is clearly down to, in terms of the scale of it, which you did talk down at one stage, a massive scale of it is clearly maladministration. But there are cases that will cause serious concern. There are allegations, as you know, about judges repeatedly having points written off, serving Gardaí, state solicitors, and recently we've been informed that senior journalists have had penalty points written off who work to hold Gardaí to account. We have the allegation that the journalist Gemma O'Doherty, and it's an allegation that she lost her job because of the work she was doing around all of this area. Are you concerned, Minister, and will you investigate the reason why at least 2 senior journalists in the publication mentioned in the Guardian newspaper, covered in the Irish Post newspaper, that senior journalists at that newspaper, INM, had penalty points written off? Will you investigate those circumstances to see were they genuine? And they may well have been genuine reasons, but the public have a right to know, because in the interest of democracy, we need to know the answers. There have been. I'll wrap up with this, and thank you, Chairman, for your appreciation of this. It is critical for public confidence to be restored that overall there was huge maladministration, but there clearly were cases where people who were very powerful and connected had points written off because of who they knew. That is totally wrong, and you should undertake to investigate the circumstances where people would not hold Gardaí to account by getting points written off. Examine that.
Deputy Higgins, you have a minute.
Minister, all that is demanded is that any of us who have incurred penalty points for are treated in the same way, whether you're a public figure or a private citizen or anybody else. Now, Minister, you said that the conclusions of the Controller are in line with the findings of the report by the Assistant Commissioner O'Mahony. Clearly that is not the case, Minister, and that is easily documented. So I invite you to get your department to go through to the fine-tooth comb to revise your view on that. You do say it is only fair to acknowledge that these reports and their findings and recommendations are in response to allegation by whistleblowers, my word. Minister, I want you to go the extra mile. Be generous here. OK, maybe they didn't get everything absolutely right, but the vast substance of what they said has proved to be absolutely honest and true, and they have been victimised.
Deputy, if you just
and you have to stand up and champion the right of people in vulnerable positions to come out for the public good. So I'm asking you to do that today, and to apologise for wrong comments you made yourself, castigating these people.
Minister to respond.
Could I firstly say to Deputy O'Higgins, no one has been victimised. No one has been victimised, Deputy, and there's no basis for alleging anyone has been victimised. The allegations that were made were taken very seriously. The allegations that were made included allegations that a number of road fatalities in which people lost their lives were a consequence of fixed notice charges being cancelled. That was clearly, on a very detailed basis, established to be untrue. Such allegations could have caused a great deal of stress to families already distressed as a consequence of losing a loved one. Despite the very detailed addressing of those matters in a report that's before the Joint Oireachtas Justice Committee that Deputy Lochlainn has access to and others have access to this information because I published it. Despite that, the individuals who raise these issues are adamantly insisting that they disagree with the contents of that report. The allegations alleged widespread corruption and conspiracy in An Garda Síochána. There's absolutely no doubt there have been administrative and bureaucratic failings. I've also no doubt that there's been a number of fixed notice charges cancelled, which, based on the background circumstances, as detailed in the reports, were absolutely justified. And most of us, I think everyone would stand by them. And certainly there were some decisions that I've deliberately described as exotic that I would question. And indeed, that is one of the reasons why the Garda Commissioner has changed the procedures and provided for oversight, and he made an initial statement on this when the original reports were published, and a very detailed new guidelines were published, which do amend the previous guidelines. It's been suggested earlier today in this House that they're just reproducing the same the same guidelines all over again. They're not. They address matters in a way to ensure there's proper oversight and only decisions are made where appropriate and that there's transparency, and to ensure that everyone is treated equally, because it's my view it doesn't matter who you are, you must be treated equally. And in the context, indeed, it could be said for people who are in prominent positions or members of this House, they're going to be treated less than equally, because there's an additional level there's a particular layer in the new guidelines which ensures that any applications made by them for cancellation are dealt with at a higher level with an Garda Síochána, and there's complete transparency and everything is monitored. And I'm very happy. I'm very happy with that. So let me just say that in conclusion, insofar as individuals who raised issues are alleging that the Garda reports published are untrue, let them bring forward the chapter and verse and proof of that. I'm open to be convinced, but they haven't done so. Indeed, having engaged with members of this House and published material, they didn't cooperate with the Garda investigations that took place. Now, I don't know why that is, and there's no question, Deputy, of anyone being victimised. And could I conclude by saying it is important to keep, and I'm saying this particularly to Deputy Lochlainn who raised the issue, to keep cancellations in perspective, because both the Garda and CNAG reports are consistent in showing the level of cancellations of fixed charge notices to be around 5%, meaning that 95% of fixed charge notices have been processed correctly. And indeed, within that 5%, 50% of those, there was absolutely irrefutable evidence that with regard to 50% of those, there was indisputable reasons for cancelling them. The wrong people received fixed charge notices. The registration number, for example, photographed, turned out to be different to the car owned by an individual. So whereas it's true that the CNAG report identifies some weaknesses in the process, particularly in the enforcement notices, I'm glad that the Garda Commissioner is taking action in this area, and you can assume that I will continue to monitor to ensure that matters are dealt with appropriately. And I have no doubt, and I'm concluding finally, Catherine, on this, and thank you for your patience, I have no doubt that the Garda Inspectorate will keep oversight over this area so that everyone in this House and outside it is satisfied the system is fair, is operating efficiently and appropriately.
Thank you, Minister. The next question is to the Minister for Social Protection.